Exactly 20 minutes after 7, you're here on the AM show. Get interactive, 0560 800,000. So Ghana's parliament passed the Disability Act 10 years ago to address problems facing people with disabilities. Has anything changed since the law was passed? Well, government gave itself 10 years to make all buildings accessible, for instance. Has that been achieved? Another important fact has also emerged. Ghana's disability law is weak and needs an urgent amendment. What are the weaknesses of the law? To help with the conversation, I've got Medi Sengoba, who's Program Officer, Africa, in charge of Ghana and Uganda with the Disability Rights Fund. Medi, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation.
Rita Cherewa Kusi is Executive Director, Ghana Federation of Disability Organizations. Good morning to you as well.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here. So let's talk about this law. Medi is also a human rights lawyer, just so you know. Let's put that into proper context. We've been working with this law for 10 years. How much of it, Rita, have we enforced, would you say?
Well, in our assessment, we think that we've done about 20% of it.
20% of it?
Yes, because, I mean, there are some provisions that do not necessarily require a legislative instrument for them to be implemented. Here we're talking about the physical accessibility provision that requires government to develop standards for accessibility. And this hasn't been done for now. The Act is 10 years. We haven't seen the document yet. A draft has been provided or produced, but we haven't seen the final documents yet. Talking about inclusion, promoting inclusion, the law itself it's lacking in terms of the broader interventions or provisions that will promote effective participation of persons with disabilities in society. So to the disability movement in Ghana, Ghana has a long way to go in ensuring that the Act is fully implemented.
You know, not too long ago on radio, we're talking entertainment, but we discussed a subject that we had never discussed before on the show. We're talking about how persons with disabilities survive in the creative arts industry alone. You know, talk about music, talk about acting. And I was open to a lot of things. I realized that there are a lot of things that we don't even consider at all, and I personally feel guilty as well. Even with the building where we're seated now, it had to take some great difficulty for us to get Medi in here. But Medi, you've also studied this law, you've looked at it, and there are some gaps. So let's discuss the findings now.
Thank you so much. And I must start from a point that probably the law would have been okay if Ghana had not ratified the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities in 2012. Of course, that was about 6 years after the Act 715 had come into force. And then, so what that means is that the country has to go ahead to take steps to reform its entire legal framework to ensure that it accords with the international commitments we've made, or the country has made by signing the treaty. At least the good thing, Ghana did not make any reservations when they were signing the treaty. So when you look at the law and then you look at our international obligations, there are weaknesses that are so critical to a life of a person with a disability. For example, the law is so silent about the element of affirmative action. And affirmative action, remember, takes cognizance of the fact that certain groups have been sidelined for a long period of time, and then we need to work to bring them on board. So we create special measures to ensure that they can cope up in education, in employment, in the health sector. And so if a law misses out on affirmative action and it's looking at people's rights, especially people with disabilities, usually it has problems. But also it misses out on interesting groups among people with disabilities. You know, in the disability movement, we have what we call marginalized disability groups, where we all have disabilities, but some groups are even more marginalized. I can speak about women with disabilities. I can speak about children with disabilities. The Act is completely silent. And honestly, you cannot plan for a child who has a disability minus having clear legal safeguards that protect for their, provide for their rights. And another kind of key issue that is missing within Act 715 is this new concept of legal capacity. Legal capacity means, or we call it generally equal recognition before the law. We are equally recognized as individuals before and under the law, and as a result, we enjoy rights, and then we can go ahead to exercise the rights. And when it comes to people with disabilities, the concept of exercising usually dies out. So there's, oh, you have a right to access justice, but then when you go to courts, the courts are not accessible. I usually argue a lot in my country. I'm an advocate. My only role is I only live and survive by legal practice. But then every court is not accessible. Police stations are not accessible.
Even in Uganda?
I mean, we are, even in Uganda, like we are really just working hard to get there. But I feel like then a law cannot miss out on that. But also the concept of access to information as a right. You know, for people who have visual impairments, Braille is a key component, and it's an access to information issue. For people who are deaf, sign language is a key issue. For people who are deaf-blind, tactile is a key issue. So if you have no safeguards in the legislation around access to information, then probably you're missing out a substantive part of in your legislation. And finally, I can speak about the fact that the law is also silent about the right to life. And for so many people with disabilities, life is very, very important. So many children with disabilities are facilitated to die, I must say, because they are born with disabilities. But also when you look at the UN contextualization of the right to life, it includes things like food. So many kids are starved because they have disabilities. But also I had an opportunity to do a research in the prayer camps. You find so many people who are telling you, I've been fasting for 3 days. That is a right to food, which also leads to the right to life. So the law has a series of weaknesses, and I feel like since Ghana ratified the treaty, then it would really be prudent for us to commit time, to commit resources, to commit human resources towards getting a comprehensive legislation, and then we walk down the road of implementation.
Great observations, interesting things you've come up with. But Rita, how are we pushing this agenda of amendment?
Well, the disability movement has presented a proposal for amendment of the Act, and the proposal highlights or makes some contribution to how we can address the issues that Mehdi has outlined. And there are a lot to it. We're talking about political participation. How do we create a platform or the framework for persons with disabilities to participate in our political activities?
We've got a flag bearer now.
Yeah, now, but that, you know, I mean, it's not situated in the law. I mean, it doesn't fully provide that opportunity in our disability law.
But what that also says is that anybody, it doesn't matter where you're coming from or whether you have a disability or not, you can be whatever you want to be.
Yes, I'll link that to the affirmative action issue Mehdi mentioned. I think we have the women groups that are fighting for representation in Parliament, for instance. What opportunity is there for persons with disabilities? In the affirmative action bill that is currently being worked on, we have made proposals for inclusion of persons with disabilities, and we haven't seen any of it in the bill. So it means that we need to work on our act to ensure that indeed it is inclusive of the critical issues persons with disabilities are facing in Ghana. So talking about the process, so we have submitted this to government, the proposal to government.
If you say government, which of the ministries?
Through the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection. That's our sector.
How long ago?
That was last year in December.
Okay.
Yes, and the expectation was that, oh, in fact, these are critical issues. Government will take action on it. But as we speak, we are yet to see some concrete steps on that. We are also aware that the National Council on Disability is putting in steps to kind of develop a legislative instrument for the existing act that is not comprehensive and that is not fully protecting and promoting the rights of persons with disabilities. Our appeal, to be more reasonable, is that we want that process to be stopped. We want a comprehensive act that will provide for all persons with disabilities, that will promote the rights of persons with disabilities, and that will fully protect their rights. So we have submitted our proposal, and we are appealing to our sector minister, Honorable Nanoye, to take some actions to ensure that the act is amended.
But my heart is broken because you said you presented this last year, December. That's it's almost a year now.
Yeah, almost a year.
So if
now.
nothing has been done, then you shouldn't be appealing any longer.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, Medi, can't we take any court actions?
Of course we can, but sometimes some of these processes are more of dialogue, especially where it's about legal reform. Like the obligation of civil society, for example, is to make proposals to the right people and then demand. You know, people don't like that language, but the lawyers use it a lot. We demand that work gets done, and I really find it so difficult to understand. We had this kind of discussion with a lawyer here in Ghana, and they were telling me, oh, you know, the amendment might take seven years. And I'm like, then what is the work of the members of parliament? Because then they can make oil laws, they can make laws governing minerals and all that.
In the last couple of days, you
Yes.
know, Parliament was rising, so they had to push a lot of things through.
Yeah.
And in a day, they could pass like 5 different things.
Yeah.
But they don't ever get the time to look at laws that actually impact on lives of people. But also I think the other case we need to make is the cost implications for not providing services, for not making policies, for not passing legislations that protect marginalized groups of people. Just imagine where would I be if I had not gone to school, if there wasn't an enabling framework. So the state would have to buy for me a wheelchair, I would be probably begging on the streets. But then now, when there is an enabling framework, then things get done. Probably one example I can share from Uganda, we have affirmative action in parliament, and we have 5 members of parliament representing people with disabilities. And then we have a minister responsible for disabilities. So, of course, when you look at a ministry like gender, it's too broad. Honestly, probably the minister might be having 14 bills on her table from different issues. But if there was someone whose only mandate is disabilities, and then they have to hand over this bill to a group of members of parliament whose responsibility or constituency is disability, probably the process would have been better. Probably the thinking and understanding around these issues would also be better. So I feel like for me, there's this concept of nothing about us without us, but also we've all subscribed to the leave no one behind concept. So I feel like then under that we have to look at the holistic picture of how do we enable the smallest person in Ghana to live a dignified life.
So these 5 persons in your parliament, do they have any disability or they are just representatives?
They are all people with disabilities, and we have 19 members of parliament who have disabilities generally.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
nice. Okay. So what do we intend to do, Rita? We
Well-
still appeal and hope?
Well, we are planning to present a petition to the President through the Minister of Gender, Children and Social Protection.
The same ministry that didn't
Yes.
pay much attention to
Yes.
your proposals. Why don't you just go straight to Parliament then?
We want to, as Medi mentioned, we are looking at how we dialogue on the process. So we will present to the minister, engage the ministry, where we need to even support the process from our level as a civil society organization. We will do that. And we present the petition, we follow up with the conversations on how we can possibly review the process. And I think we are ready to support the disability movement. It's ever ready to provide any technical support to get the process
So if
completed.
this fails,
Well, I think the disability movement will have to sit and take a decision on what we're going to do. The movement is made up of a lot of disabled people organizations. Currently, we can identify over 15 organizations.
1-5.
15 across the country. And so these are the more organized and visible ones that we can identify. But if we are going to take a concrete decision on such an issue, I'm sure we'll get close to 30 organizations on, to take a decision on this.
So, Mehdi, the Disability Rights Fund, how does it work?
It's a fund that was started in 2008, and we currently work in 34 countries, and one of our first countries was actually Ghana. And how we work is we are a collaborative grant maker, so we also receive funding from bigger entities or kind of bilaterals. But also what we do is we engage groups, small groups in country. So in Ghana, for example, we have 10 grantees, and we put out a call for proposals. And when that call is out, people apply. So sometimes we pick out like key issues that we think are cross-cutting and are quite important. For example, let's say domestication of the act in this context. For example, integration of disability issues in the SDGs is a key issue. For example, if there was a point when we were funding work around the inclusive education policy to ensure that disability is part of that policy. So that it's a cross-section of rights-related projects. What we don't fund is income-generating work, because it's not sustainable. Like the business phase, and then you have to fund again. So we fund work usually that results into policy, that results into programs, that results into legislation, and that results into change that can impact on people with disabilities. And we prefer projects usually that go to the grassroots, where not so many people reach, but also where we record so enormous needs in terms of rights realization and probably sometimes human rights abuse.
Okay. I've got a message here from Samuel. I don't know how much of this, you can help or you can direct him to a good place to go. Samuel from Wale Wale says, I'm a physically disabled university graduate who has been looking for a job for 3 years now. Our effort to start up something on my own is becoming difficult due to my physical disability. So tell your panelists to help me start something my own. Is there somewhere to go, Rita?
We've launched a project to promote or create employment opportunities for persons with disabilities in Ghana. And basically we're looking at those who have had the opportunity to go through formal education, say to the graduate level. And so someone can send his CV. For a start, I think we will have a conversation with him on exactly what he wants to do. But he can send his CV to us. If it's okay, we can share our email address.
Yes, please do.
So it's info@gfdgh.org. info, that's info@G, that's the Ghana, F, that Federation, and then D, it's disability, GH.org. info@gfdgh.org. You should send a CV to us because we are compiling CVs of graduates who have disability, and we will.
What's the plan?
So we will engage employers. We've identified a few of them that we have started a process with. For instance, for the last 2-3 years, we've worked with Standard Chartered Bank. And they've recruited some persons with disabilities. They are helping in kind of training persons with disabilities to present themselves well in interviews and others. So we are identifying institutions to work with, and our main focus is to get them to recruit persons with disabilities.
Okay, so Mehdi, I can't let you go without asking, what has been some of your challenges? You've got a great job. You shouldn't have any issues.
Personal challenges, organizational challenges?
No personal challenges.
Of course, accessibility is one of the biggest challenges any person who uses a wheelchair will ever confront. And access does not necessarily, goes beyond even the stairs. Like you saw here, I had 3 men carrying me up the stairs, but also the built environment entirely. You get to a place and the bathroom has a very narrow entrance, which means you have to take classes for days without using the bathroom. There are schools I went to for several years and I never know where the bathrooms are. because then they are not accessible. But also accessing basic information. Usually for the university I went to for my bachelor's degree, law students usually are supposed to be in the library full time, but then it is like on the third floor, and then negotiating stairs and all that is so complicated. And what is really hurting is the fact that there is this saying that disability is not inability. But then when you look at an environment which is full of barriers, it becomes an inability. When I get 50% because of the barriers I've made in accessing the materials and the information, and then the employers want someone with an A, normally they say, oh, people with lower class degrees don't apply. And then I'm getting a lower class degree simply because I was struggling to access a bathroom, access library, access the classroom and everything. So then kind of when your papers are assessed to be as if you're a person who's not able. But then when I've had the opportunity to study from other environments, I did my master's from the US. And then when you compare my documents, I always share this. In the US, I look like I'm an A++ student. I graduated within the top 3 students. And then my transcript in Uganda, okay, maybe top 100. And it's the same person. So that then means that if we worked towards a country, that is an environment that enables everyone to live independently. In the US, I was living alone. And actually, someone would say, oh, but you see, this is the US and this is Ghana.
Yeah.
But when you look at the modifications that were done, it was just planning. The doors were wide, so I could take myself in and come out. The classrooms were set in a way that I could roll my wheelchair wherever I want to go. And Ghana can do that. We are constructing buildings. We are, like I've seen so many road infrastructure already going on. But how many roads have ramps? How many of them have pavements? How many of them I've seen roads with huge barricades where you come with your wheelchair, you've wheeled all the way, and then you get stuck, you can't transition to the other side. Then you have to go back and start all over again. So I feel like for me, what we need to do is look at these things as human rights issues.
Okay.
And then not human rights as a bigger issue, but individual rights.
Okay.
And so this concept of reasonable accommodation, which means individually tailored support systems to enable me cope with the environment is so critical.
All right. We will be following up on this. This is not the last conversation we'll have on this. Please call on us a lot more times. Yeah. But we're grateful that you could make it today. Let's see how far this process of amendment would go. But give us the feedback as well. Thanks for being here. Rita Cherwakusi is Executive Director, Ghana Federation of Disability Organizations, and Medi Sengoba is Program Officer, Africa Disability Right Fund, and he has a responsibility for Ghana and Uganda. Thanks for watching this. Stay with us. We'll come back, and it's a Relationship Friday. We're also getting messages already on the dreams, a continuation of that today. So we've got fun stuff coming up here on the show. Stay with us.